From 1878 to 1968, there were 71 lake captains that called Bayview, Wisconsin, on the shore of Lake Michigan, their home. While they lived here, they captained 195 different ships, from tugboats to schooners to steamships, in voyages that took them to every one of the Great Lakes. Join us now for another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we explore not only these captains, but also their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes.
Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we talk about the 71 different Bayview Lake Captains from the years 1878 to 1968. This episode, like all the other ones, is brought to you courtesy the Historic Bayview Lake Captains Society. Now, standing here right on the edge of Bay Street, but I got a tree there kind of protecting me as the cars fly by. But where you just saw me pan here was once all houses, and then on this side across the street, on the other side of Bay, was the nation's largest Malleable Iron Company from 1888 to 1901. I have a previous video that talks about the man that built Wisconsin Malleable, superintendent, his first superintendent, and their homes were right here and right here. They lived right across the street from where they worked. Both lived in Bayview. That's the James J. Hagerman episode if you want to go back and take a look at it. Now, but this episode talks about the famous, or infamous maybe, businessman, financier, New York City, John Pierpont Morgan, also known as J.P. Morgan. Today, when people think about naked capitalism at the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century, J.P. Morgan has to be right there at the top of the list of men associated with that time in American history. And believe it or not, he has a connection in this capitalism era to Bayview. I haven't seen it reported anywhere in Bayview, so I think you're probably hearing this for the first time. Maybe not, but I think that is the case. Now, J.P. Morgan, his connection with Bayview comes about because of Wisconsin Malleable Iron Company across the street, built by James Hagerman, that lived here for a couple of years. Now, that factory was built by Hagerman, some others, that included William A. Draves, who was his first superintendent. Hagerman founded the world's largest iron ore deposit, America's largest iron ore deposit in northern Wisconsin after a couple of years here, and he split, moved over to Tony Grand Avenue. But William Draves lived right over here, and he stayed for 5 years. So it was Draves really that laid the foundation as a superintendent, building the factory, building it up, getting it operated, so that 5 years after Draves leaves, or 10 years from the start of Wisconsin Malleable, it becomes the nation's largest. Draves and Sivyer at the 5-year mark, Fred Sivyer, who was also with this firm, they'd been together at another one before that, over here on East Lincoln Avenue, that burned in a fire. After 5 years at Wisconsin Malleable, they left, formed their own company in Walker's Point, Malleable Iron Company, called Northwestern Malleable Iron Company, and in 1901 they surpassed Wisconsin Malleable as America's largest malleable iron company. And it was because of the meteoric rise of Northwestern Malleable Iron Company in Walker's Point, and this one here too, which had been America's largest up until 1901, J.P. Morgan spotted it. He saw a success story, he spotted it. Now, Morgan was known for inventing the corporate buyout. There were 80 companies, malleable iron companies, 80 total in America in 1902. J.P. Morgan, heavily involved in one area of his vast empire, which is steel. U.S. Steel Company Corporation. Morgan spotted the two biggies, Wisconsin Malleable and the biggest at that point in time, just past it, Northwestern Malleable, both in Milwaukee. He spotted them, and he wants to buy them out. Now, what happens is a clue for Morgan, the way he operated. What he did was, he found out who Northwestern Malleable's major customer was. I think it was called McCormick Harvester Works. And he bought them out. Then he approaches Fred Sivyer and William Draves at Northwestern Malleable, and he says, I want to buy out your company. But he gave a restriction. You can't, neither of you, Draves and Sivyer, can be associated in any capacity with the iron business after we sign the papers. To which they scoffed, and they said, no way are we doing that. And then Morgan pulled out his trump card, and he said, okay, but I tell you what's going to happen. Since I now own McCormick harvester works, your major customer, if you don't sign, I'm going to take their business somewhere else. This dragged down all in 1902. Actually, I think it was 6 months in 1902, the whole process. Fred Sivyer, the president of Northwestern Malleable, was primarily involved in the negotiations. He dragged it out as long as he could. Eventually had to sell. Got the most he could, which I think was about $3 million, something like that. By that time, Morgan had whittled down his desire to buy all 80 to just the top 17. And he got to 15 right away, but the last two holdouts were Wisconsin Malleable behind me and Northwestern Malleable. Now, I don't know the tactics that he employed against Wisconsin Malleable to get them to sell, but they also sold at the same time that the Sivyers and Draves company, Northwestern Malleable, sold out to Morgan. So Morgan bought both of them. They had a new boss, headquartered under the International Harvester brand, owned by Morgan. And that's really about it. That's the connection. That's how J.P. Morgan had a connection with Bayview. And it was not an insignificant one. Now, Simon Stanhope, coming up here in the narration, has some more information for you to add to what I've said. I spent a little more time on it simply because I am extremely familiar with it. I did all the research on it. Of course, I did all the research on the others too, but this one especially, because I don't think anybody knows that J.P. Morgan has this connection with Bayview. But now you do. And with that, I will sign off and say, hats off to our Bayview Lake Captains. See you in the next episode. Oh, and if you're wondering what the connection is between this episode and Bayview Lake Captains, there isn't one. But I think it's that important that I brought it up to you, and I wanted to showcase it here. Okay, that's enough. So long. Bye-bye.
Welcome to another installment of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we discuss the lives of the 71 different lake captains that once lived in Bayview, Wisconsin, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, in the age of sail and steam. This discussion will include their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes. Here is the map of lake captains' homes in Bayview, to show you where this episode takes place. Its location focuses primarily on the large green arrow. Today, we will not be discussing a Bayview lake captain. In fact, we won't even be discussing someone with maritime connections to Bayview. Why not? Because the information in this episode is highly significant and important to Bayview history, and, even if it's not maritime related, needs to be reported. The author, Commander Douglas D. Mintline, USNR, retired, came across it while researching his book, A Brother Helps His Sister, The True Story of William A. Draves, the schooner Arctic, and the house at 515 East Lincoln Avenue. Many Bayviewers interested in its history are aware of the shipping magnate Eber Brock Ward, who built the Bayview Iron Company and factory known as the Rolling Mill. But most don't know there was an even more famous man, the New York City financial giant John Pierpont Morgan, who also owned and operated a different Bayview Iron Company and factory, initially founded by Ward's protege James J. Hagerman, president of the Rolling Mill, who lived on Winchester Street. The details of how J.P. Morgan came to own and operate this Bayview company are fascinating. Morgan's Bayview connection involves the two largest malleable iron companies in America, one of which was in Milwaukee, Northwestern Malleable Iron Company of Walker's Point, and the other of which was in Bayview, Wisconsin Malleable Iron Company, located on Bay Street, opposite Winchester Street. In 1902, the huge success of both of these companies caught the eye of early 20th century New York City financier John Pierpont Morgan. Known for his aggressiveness in business, the quintessential capitalist Morgan perfected the art of the corporate buyout, and he was about to apply this tactic to force the sale to him of the aforementioned two Milwaukee and Bayview companies. What follows is a chapter from Commander Mintline's book, where J.P. Morgan's dealings that connect Morgan permanently to Milwaukee, and especially Bayview history, are factually discussed. Specifically, how it is that the infamous and legendary J.P. Morgan of New York came to buy, own, and operate an iron company and factory in Bayview. As with all of these video episodes, the research and sources supporting this information and conclusion can be found in Commander Mintline's book mentioned previously. We will now begin reading the chapter from the book about J.P. Morgan's connection to Bayview. Chapter 66. The attempt by Northwestern Malleable Iron Company President Fred Sivyer and Vice President William Draves' wife Emily to get William to back off and slow down had worked with the 3-month vacation to Germany on the ocean liner SS Kaiser Wilhelm de Grosse, but predictably and sadly only temporarily. They could never ever change the man that was driven to succeed, the heart, the soul. Not a chance, though they were right to try. So, sure enough, as soon as William Draves returned from that trip to Germany, he jumped right back into running both Northwestern Malleable's and Chain-Belt Company's factories simultaneously, as the superintendent of each, with the same zeal for achievement as he had before the extended time off. Business at both companies continued to explode, and he is the one that made the highly successful products for both. Not only that, but Northwestern Malleable was also now constructing a huge new headquarters building next to its old one in Walker's Point, plus a massive new factory addition to go with it. Draves had been directly involved in this design build from the beginning, so he jumped back into that project too, finishing off the headquarters building in time to move in late 1900, then proceeding with the factory expansion in 1901. The year 1902 proved especially monumental. Northwestern Malleable Iron Company, which William Draves co-founded with Fred Sivyer as a partnership 20 years earlier in June 1882, and whose production factory Draves had built, run, and expanded completely from scratch as its only superintendent, became the largest malleable iron company in America. It was also paying a massive dividend on common stock, ranging from 15% to a whopping 35% for the previous year, 1901. The company was so successful that it caught the watchful eye of one of the nation's wealthiest businessmen, John Pierpont Morgan of New York City, the man who invented the concept of the corporate buyout. Morgan had just finished the previous year, 1901, forming a new company called the U.S. Steel Corporation, the result of a merger between a massive steel company owned by Andrew Carnegie and 9 other steel companies. Now Morgan wanted to expand his new U.S. steel empire further by drawing in malleable iron companies. Halfway through the year of 1902, Morgan decided he wanted to buy Milwaukee's Northwestern Malleable and Bayview's Wisconsin Malleable, along with all of the other 80 malleable iron factories across the USA. These were then to be absorbed into another of his companies, International Harvester Works Corporation, which was under the umbrella of Morgan's now rapidly expanding and soon-to-be massive U.S. Steel Corporation. Northwestern Malleable's Fred Sivyer, proving himself the equal of Morgan and his hired guns, squawked at Morgan's early buyout attempts that would have required both Sivyer and business partner William Draves to get out and stay out of the malleable iron business for 10 years. After this attempt failed, Morgan and his underlings then engaged in outright bullying, telling Sivyer he could either take the money they were offering for the buyout, or Morgan would take the huge business Northwestern Malleable currently had, with Morgan's recently purchased McCormick Harvester Works, absorbed into Morgan's International Harvester Works elsewhere. This would cause the loss of Northwestern Malleable's major customer, and thus put the company at risk. But Fred Sivyer would have none of it. He stood his ground, and then finally, after 6 months of negotiations, reached an agreement with Morgan. Sivyer, ever the clever negotiator, had repeatedly emphasized Northwestern Malleable's status as the nation's largest malleable iron company, as a tactic to try to secure the best deal for him, partner William Draves, the employees, and the stockholders. By the time Sivyer agreed, Morgan's initial target for absorbing all 80 companies had dwindled first to 50, then to 30, and finally to 17, though these 17 were the largest, controlling 85% of the nation's malleable iron output. The agreement reached with Morgan in Detroit on 3rd December 1902 concluded in 2 parts. The first was for Morgan's purchase of 15 of the 17 companies, but excluded both Northwestern and Wisconsin Malleable, the nation's first and second largest, respectively. Wisconsin Malleable, located on Bay Street, directly opposite Winchester Street in Bayview, had been the USA's largest for 13 years, until it was surpassed in early 1902 by Northwestern Malleable, located in Walker's Point. Wisconsin Malleable was founded in 1888 by James J. Hagerman, former president of the Bayview Rolling Mill, who lived on Winchester Street. Both Fred Sivyer and William Draves, Wisconsin Malleable's first superintendent, were instrumental in helping Hagerman build it, and were significant contributors to its rise to America's largest. It was Sivyer and Draves that then left Wisconsin Malleable, after 5 years, to co-found Northwestern Malleable, which years later, in 1902, surpassed Bayview's Wisconsin Malleable as America's largest. The second part of the agreement was concluded 3 weeks later, at the end of December 1902, when the last 2 holdouts of Morgan's targeted 17 companies, Northwestern Malleable and Bayview's Wisconsin Malleable, finally got what they wanted and agreed to sell. Fred Sivyer had been the last holdout of the 17 companies. The final price paid by Morgan for all 17 companies was $20 million, $469 million in 2017, with both Northwestern and Wisconsin Malleable being paid the most, $1 million each, $29.4 million in 2017. They each received double what the next closest company got from Morgan. The payment, for the most part, wasn't in cash, though. All 17 were mostly paid in stock of Morgan's U.S. Steel Corporation. However, Northwestern and Wisconsin Malleable both appeared to have received at least some part of the deal in cash for less stock. There were no layoffs, and all of the companies continued to operate under their current management. The major difference now, however, was that after this buyout, both Northwestern Malleable and Bayview's Wisconsin Malleable would no longer be able to operate independently, but instead would now have to report to International Harvester under the vast U.S. Steel corporate umbrella, all overseen by the legendary Morgan and his underlings, headquartered in New York City. Put succinctly, J.P. Morgan was now their owner and boss. So, there you have it, the famous J.P. Morgan's Iron Company in Bayview, and how it all came about. Thanks for watching. This photograph isn't about Bayview or its lake captains, but it's from the same era of Great Lakes maritime history. We thought we'd close with it for enjoyment, as it captures the spirit of the era. If you'd like to read more details about J.P. Morgan's connection to Bayview, as well as the sources for the information contained in today's video, you can find these and more in the book A Brother Helps His Sister, The True Story of William A. Draves, the Schooner Arctic, and the House at 515 East Lincoln Avenue. For sale now. Buy individual volumes on both Amazon.com and HenschelHouseBooks.com. All proceeds from book sales go to support various maritime history projects related to Bayview's lake captains. One of these is a plaque and marker with the captains' names and addresses on it, as part of the creation of the Bayview Lake Captains Historic District, which will be the first of its kind in America. If you would like to contribute to support these projects, to include this and other markers honouring Bayview's lake captains, with 100% of all donations and contributions in all forms going to support them, please consider contributing to us through the listings found on our website by pressing the Contribute button. Note, we are not a 501c3, so contributions are not tax-deductible. If, for some reason, we are unable to secure these markers, then all funds donated to this site will be given as a cash donation to the museum ship SS City of Milwaukee in Manistee, Michigan. This is the only surviving intact ship that was once captained by a Bayview Lake captain, and in its case was captained by at least 2, and likely 3, totaling over 20 years between them. Finally, we also have free self-guided walking tours of Bayview's 71 lake captains' homes, using only your phone. It's simple and easy. Just go to our website shown here, find the item on the menu bar at the upper left named Free Self-Guided Walking Tours, and then scroll down to find the map with the instructions. Zoom in by street. When you find a captain's house you're interested in, click on it, and details appear on the right, along with a link to the YouTube episode from this channel that provides the biography of the captain that lived there. It's free, fun, and available any time you are out walking. Just bring along your phone. I'm Simon Stanhope, narrator for these episodes. Join us again soon for the next chapter of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains.